Bunch of updates for you this morning about what is going on in the court system, but let's go ahead and start with this. Elon Musk continuing his attacks on judges. This in a rather ill-informed tweet. He says, quote, "This is a judicial coup. We need 60 senators to impeach the judges and restore rule of the people." Okay, this is where his South African roots are really coming out because, first of all, impeachment happens in the House. Second of all, to convict in the Senate, it takes 67 senators. So nice try on that one. Obviously, community noted on his own platform. But more significant than that, I mean, this is part of a broader push towards impeaching the judges, towards putting pressure on the judges. The President of the United States has echoed some of this language as well. Put D7 up on the screen here. Elon has also donated to Republican members of Congress who have directly supported impeaching judges. He's given the maximum allowable direct contribution. It's something like $6,600. So we're not talking about millions here, Sagar. It's more about the message he's trying to send. And this has been, one of the core things, again, that has been different about Trump 2.0 is Elon, from the very first fight, made it clear he is perfectly willing to use his billions in order to enforce conformity from the Republican Party. And lo and behold, you combine that and with the fact that Trump has just completely subsumed this party at this point, but you have so much less actual dissent this time when it comes to vote taking than you did in Trump 1.0. And Elon again here signaling the direction he wants Republicans to go in with this increasingly hostile view towards the federal judicial system.
Yeah. Well, I am glad you agree with me, Crystal, that many foreigners don't have a civic understanding of America and should perhaps keep their mouths shut a little bit, but whenever they come here. Just an idea, maybe if you're a campus protester or something like that.
Listen, I would,
maybe keep your bullshit to
I would
yourself
bend a lot on immigration if we're going to deport Elon Musk.
See, there you go. All right. Well, he actually is a good example about interlopers and all of that. But anyway, coming back to the Musk point, it is important for people to understand here that it is not like he's giving them a ton of money. It's $6,600. It's really about sending a message. And I would say that the most important thing is generating the headlines for all of the other Republicans who are in the House and in the Senate to know that you're not just getting a donation from Elon, and obviously that will help in the future with respect to America PAC and his other super PAC organizations, but it's really about the boost that you're getting within the Republican base and on their media, which is predominantly, at least the thought leaders and others getting them from Twitter. People like us are covering the story. And if you're a Republican legislator, the message is clear, go along with this, and I'm gonna get a tongue bath from Elon on Twitter, which is very useful to them whenever they go back to their district. It helps them get on Fox News, get some media publicity and elsewhere. So it's really just about moving the incentives more towards like Elon's particular approval of you and your ability to then thrive in the Republican Party in the future.
It's that, and it's also if you get rewarded if you do what I want you to do. And the threat is also hanging over that of if you don't, then there's going to be infinite money basically put towards a primary challenger if you get crosswise. So, it is definitely intended to send a signal to all. And so far, it's really worked. Actually, Lisa Murkowski was giving some speech back in Alaska where she was talking about he could fund a primary challenger. I could be done tomorrow if he just drops however much he wants to drop. So they're definitely.
She thinks that's true because she survived multiple.
She might be one of the rare ones that could survive because Alaska is so unique.
Campaign. You know how insane that is?
Yeah. But I mean, that is definitely they're definitely thinking about it, given how central money in politics is. And it's not just the money, like you said. I mean, he's got the president, he's got Twitter. They have so much power and control over this party at this point that even someone like Lisa Murkowski has to at least be worried that it would be a problem for her. Let's go ahead and put now D1 up on the screen. This is the very latest with regard to the Alien Enemies Act deportations. So a judge warned of possible consequences after DOJ pushed back on questions about the deportation flight. Let me read you a little bit of this here so I can make sure to get the legalese correct. So it says a federal judge Wednesday warned of the possibility of consequences after they pushed back. U.S. District Judge James Boasberg had ordered the Trump administration to submit answers to his questions about the timing of the deportation flights and custody handover of deportees, giving the government until noon Wednesday to respond. The government submitted a filing Wednesday morning asking for a pause of that order to answer his questions. It contended that the answers could expose negotiations with foreign countries to serious risk of micromanaged and unnecessary judicial fishing expeditions and potential public disclosure. The judge was not impressed with this. The government basically threatened that they may invoke state secrets doctrine to keep this all private, even though, we talked the other day about, we actually all know now because of public flight tracking information where the flights were, when they took off, when they landed, all that stuff. Not to mention that they themselves released and amplified these videos of the, detainees and having their head shaved and all that sort of stuff. So in any case, the judge said the government's motion is the first time it's suggested that disclosing the information requested by the court could amount to the release of state secrets. To date, in fact, the government has made no claim that information is even classified. He continued, for example, the Secretary of State has revealed many operational details of the flights, including the number of people involved, many of their identities, the facility to which they were brought, the manner of treatment, time window during which these events occurred. Court is therefore unsure at this time how compliance with its minute order would jeopardize state secrets. He gave the Justice Department until noon Thursday, that's today, possibly after this even gets posted, to either answer his questions about the flights or invoke the state secrets doctrine and explain the basis for such invocation. So TLDR is they're still trying to stonewall, and the judge is getting increasingly impatient.
Yes, and they may get held in contempt. Even if they do, it's going to go on a rocket to the appellate court, and then from the appellate court, it's going to go to the Supreme Court. So there's still quite a bit to happen here. Bringing back to the judge conversation, it is just becoming clear that there are so many of these things. I have spoke to one friend who said that this might actually be packaged with a multitude of the other judges' orders so that SCOTUS tries to get ahead of in the last 48 hours, we've had the USAID court decision, the transgender decision, there was USIP, and there's also this one. So it is one that I actually am missing one. I'm forgetting exactly what it is, but that's 5 literally just in the last 72 hours.
Yeah.
That these questions of temporary restraining order and the role of district appellate and timely process and all of that could be picked up by SCOTUS ASAP in order to head off future showdowns like the one that we're seeing right now.
Yeah, you referenced the USIP one. Let's see, this is D4. We can put up on the screen. It's just the latest info here. A judge has denied a restraining order to block Doge from its takeover of the U.S. Institute of Peace, saying that despite being offended by Doge's hostile and threatening treatment of American citizens, there are issues with the merits of the lawsuit. So that one, no final ruling here, but a temporary restraining order in this instance was denied. And then I believe they'll begin to weigh in on the merits next week, on Monday, if memory serves. So that's basically the latest. But the campaign around pressuring the judges is a central part of their strategy at this point. And floating impeachment for judges, Elon floating putting his money behind it. Trump was asked, Ryan and Emily played this, was asked about would you ever just defy their court orders? And he said, no, but you need to look at some of these judges. You need to look into some of these judges, what seem to be sort of tacitly backing this direction to put pressure on them. Do I think that any of them could actually get impeached, given that, as Elon apparently doesn't know, it takes 67 votes in the Senate in order to impeach? I think that is not going to happen. But they, again, are trying to send a message and make it uncomfortable. I think in some of these instances, it could backfire. I mean, these are human beings. If you're aggressively threatening them, et cetera, sometimes people get their back up and it makes them even more determined. But, the other thing with regard to this particular Judge Boasberg is if you look at his case record, he's definitely not a lib. He was actually put in place first by George W. Bush. He's had a bunch of decisions that actually went in favor of Trump. So, the caricature of him is certainly not accurate in terms of the way he's being portrayed as some quote unquote radical left judge.
Yeah, I mean, it is annoying to see them try and paint that as both. People are pointing out his wife or his daughter or whatever. Look, we talked about this in our debate. I think it's crazy, the idea that a judge could take a U.S. military aircraft and turn around. It
actually wasn't a military aircraft. It was a ICE chartered flight. But there's many instances of judge rulings having an impact on things that happen overseas because your ruling applies to the agency. The agency is giving the direction. And so this is not It's not crazy. It's not unprecedented. It's happened many times.
I was about to zoom out a little bit and not just talk about the flight, but like, for example, the transgender order. It's like this was a policy implemented by executive review by the Obama administration, then flipped by the Trump administration. And now the judge ruling that actually this violates the law is literally citing Hamilton in their footnotes. So it's like, let's all also be like a little bit honest here.
Yeah, but that's fine. But that's why you have an appeals process.
No, I'm not disputing that, but I get very annoyed at this idea that like there's this worshipfulness of the judges and the courts when anytime some crackpot judge in Texas rules on mifepristone, it's like, oh, the courts are illegitimate, this is ridiculous. When the Supreme Court rolls on SCOTUS, it's like, oh, we got to pack the court. It's like, let's be honest here about like reverence and annoyance for judges both on sides of the political spectrum and for where that appeals process comes in. I mean, I genuinely do think many of these judges' orders are patently insane, like the transgender one in particular. I'm like, what, like under what rule are you allowed to say that this is some like civil rights violation when it was an executive policy from the very beginning that was put into place by Obama, flipped by Trump, and now basically put back into place by Biden and then flipped by Trump again? It is just so obviously within the Article 2 powers of the commander-in-chief under the US Constitution. Now this is going to take forever in terms of pushing things through the court. Like that's why, if anything, I'm cheering for like a fulsome decision because this is not the way that a government should be run, like literally constantly being changed by some district court. We saw the same thing in the first Trump administration. Some Hawaii judge will rule like this is not legitimate and the travel ban is off.
I haven't acquainted myself really with the transgender decision. I haven't dug into
the Hamilton.
I haven't dug into the legal merits of the case, et cetera. So I don't want to opine on that one. But I mean, the reason that there's so many court decisions is because they're violating the law so frequently. Like that's the reason why. And I mean, you've had judges that Trump appointed rule against Trump. You've had George W. Bush appointees. You've had, across the spectrum because what they're doing is so extreme. Now, much of this will go through the appeals process and will go up to the Supreme Court. That's the way that this is supposed to go. But, to discuss that this is a concerted strategy for them to try to intimidate the judges, put pressure on them. And they also, they're playing this game where they are in defiance of court orders. I mean, with the planes is probably the most brazen example, but also with USAID and a bunch of these other decisions, the judge will issue a very clear ruling and they'll just be like, no. And they'll come up with some, right? Oh, well, we didn't understand, or we thought you meant this, or actually we're doing it under this other power, whatever. But it does stack up to persistent defiance of the courts in a way that is extraordinary, in a way that we have not seen before. And, that does represent a sort of new era and new approach where he's trying to consolidate, and very effectively so, all of this power in the executive so that he and Elon can basically do whatever they want. They've already destroyed the Congress has given up their power. They don't even want to have power anymore. So that one's dead and gone. And the only thing that's left is the judiciary to serve as any sort of check on an executive. And that means, not just Trump, who you feel more comfortable with, but if there is another, election with a Democrat elected, then they could easily take up that same approach for ends that you would not be excited about. I would not approve of.
Fully, but
so that's why these battles are significant and important, and why their approach to them truly is different. I mean, we haven't had for 200 plus years, we've had a consensus that you don't try to impeach a judge over a ruling you don't like. And that's something they're seeking to change. That's really noteworthy, and it's really different.
Well, I wouldn't take it. It's not like there weren't calls in the FDR era and all that to impeach, actually during Lincoln as well, to impeach judges for people who they disagreed with. It's just that usually they don't rise to that level because you need 67 people to do it, and it's not going to happen. So I think I agree with you that it's not going to happen. I just am saying at a philosophical level, in a certain sense, like what is happening here is kind of like a left fever dream that was under the Biden administration, where they just desperately wanted Biden to defy the courts on student loans, or I've talked previously about like maximum stretch executive power. This is basically an idea of like seizing government as opposed to, or seizing government in this case for the sake of dismantling government, and probably the left case is seizing government in the case of actually trying to exercise the power of the government. But in both, they're trying to invest more in the executive authority under that president. And as always, in this district judge thing, I think we also have to take a step back. I saw somebody make a good point, is that a single district judge, and there's 700 district judges, actually has more power than a single Supreme Court justice, in the sense that a single district judge can issue a temporary restraining order that applies to the entire United States federal government, whereas it takes 5 out of the 9 justices to actually implement a policy that basically is the ultimate ruling of the Supreme Court of the United States. And process by death by process is a Washington thing as old as time, throwing the wrenches. Now, I don't disagree that the Trump administration, all of them, have taken extraordinary action on USAID and all this other, many of which I disagree with and I actually think is quite stupid. But the district judge point about governance by judiciary, where it's just this constant judge shopping both left and right for where they're looking at, that system is genuinely kind of insane. Now, is it better to have some dictator in Elon and Trump? No, not necessarily. But I do think that people should look at this and say, this is not really the correct way, or at least I think, how judicial review was supposed to be put into place, where there's this constant back and forth. And then this district judge is invested with all this power. And then sometimes we have to wait months for an appellate process or whatever to go through the Supreme Court. On a timely basis, there is genuinely like a criticism, I think, to be had of the way that this is playing out on a practical level.
The time benefits Trump.
No, I don't think so at all.
100%.
Why would it benefit?
Because think about, this is their strategy. This is what Bannon and others talk about, is flood the zone and overwhelm these institutions. And while it's having to slowly work its way through this process and appeals court and eventually maybe go to the Supreme Court, et cetera, USAID is destroyed. CFPB is destroyed. Like that is what they're counting on, is for it to take a long time. And in the meantime, as we've said before, federal government agent, it's not a switch you can flip on and off. In the meantime, incredible damage is being done that no court will be adequate to undo. Now, can they forestall some of the worst damage? Potentially. But, we've already seen the way that this unfolds. So I view it quite the polar opposite. Number one, the time that it takes only benefits Trump. Even if we just look at this discrete example of the planes that were able to take off while a judge is having to just give the most basics of deliberation, that's already, it's done and dusted and those people are gone and that's that. So, even in that discrete example, you can see the way that they're able to accomplish some of their objectives just by taking advantage of the fact that it takes time with the courts. But I also think that what they're doing by violating so many laws and constitutional and, the Constitution at once is they are overwhelming the court system and seizing so much more power from it and betting that it's going to be effectively inadequate ultimately to be able to, forestall them achieving their objectives. So quite to the contrary of the court system being so powerful, I think the court system looks pretty weak right now in terms of being able to, stop what many lawyers across the political spectrum, like I said, Trump appointees, Obama appointees, George W. Bush appointees, all across the board have said looks to be illegal, unconstitutional violations of the law. So, I guess I see it polar opposite. Rather than thinking these individual district court judges are so powerful, I think the whole judiciary put together is really, it's the only institutional check on this administration, but I'm under no illusions that it's sufficient.
I take your point, but I think it's because you see, what they want to do, let's say the Department of Education, they want to eradicate the Department of Education. It's
right.
Okay, well, you can't literally do that. So they're going to try do 50%. Or USAID, even better example. Yes, you can stop the funding, but if they order you to get it back and it's back in a year, sure, you've caused some chaos in the interim, but you have made no substantive real change to the overall arc of the U.S. government. You might have knocked it off a little bit in terms of all of this funding, but it'll heal and it'll go right back to funding the same NGOs, let's say 5 years from now under a Democratic president. And in the district judge case, for example, you're talking about the planes, it's well, you could see it in that sense. It's yeah, all those people have been deported. But if you wanted to continue to make this a long-standing policy, it's literally not happening. I think that's probably a good outcome if you're some liberal ACLU immigration lawyer. So the point is that you may are not getting everything that you want, but on balance, you are actually putting a stop to a lot of the policy or even the implementation of longstanding ones. So I do want to see a resolution like to this, because in a sense too, the chaos becoming the story, it's like what we were talking about with tariffs. With the chaos becoming the story, you get all the political backlash of something and not even any of the so-called intended benefit that was supposed to come as a result of this. So you may get all the political backlash of deportation, something like that, and not actually even have any deportation. So in a sense, you don't even really get what you voted for and the policy, while at the same time, you're inviting all of this like court and district battle after over every single executive action. And I will grant you that there are many I think are wrong and are unconstitutional, whatever. But the point is that by this district judge process of all of this happening, there is no confidence, I think, on either side here, because in the way that I'm taking your view of the situation, that actually any coherence is happening in the government at all. And I don't think that chaos works at a small d democratic level, especially increasing confidence in both the judiciary, where people think the judiciary is failing, and then people who think the judiciary is overreaching, if any of that makes sense.
It does. And I think you're right. Like, obviously, it's not popular. It's not going well for them from a political standpoint. But that's not the only goal. Like, maybe they care about that. Maybe some of them care about that. But the ideological goal is to break government, and they're doing that pretty effectively. The ideological goal is to, for them to push the limits of the amount of power that Trump can claim. And, they're doing that. And Elon can claim. And they're doing that very effectively. The ideological goal for Elon is, I think a number of different things. But he's certainly been able to use his power to get rid of investigations that are targeting his companies. He's in position to hurt competitors. He's in position to, take contracts and funnel them towards his companies, et cetera. So from that perspective, I think it's working to serve some of the ideological goals that they have, that like the Rust votes of the world have, where, they hate government. They don't want government to work, because if government doesn't work, that gives you more of a cudgel to further cut and destroy government. And so, what was his quote? He wants to make the bureaucracy miserable, or make them suffer, or something like that. He wants them to self-deport.
Yeah.
They're doing,
but they're not self-deporting. They're not quitting enough.
They're digging in. They are digging in their heels in a certain sense. But from speaking with, plenty of government workers, they're definitely being made miserable, uncomfortable, et cetera. So that part is succeeding.
One of my buddies has to go in at 5:30 a.m. to an office that they hadn't been to for years. There's not even enough desks for everybody, but they all have to be there. Yeah. And they have to stagger their time. And he's like, look, this is not more efficient. This is actually obviously stupid. So,
it's not about efficiency.
I'll bring it back
really the goal.
To Curtis Yarvin actually made a pretty good point, where he's like, look, if you don't do this properly, the bureaucracy will become roaring back and will actually become 10 times more both entrenched in our institutions. I think he's actually right.
Did you see the Tim Walz quote on this?
No, what did he say?
Finish your point, and I'll look it up.
Curtis's point was basically, if you don't do it effectively, then you're actually just ensuring like not only like a restoration of the regime, but the regime on steroids. I think he's right in the sense that right now, Doge has successfully cut a few programs, okay, that's cute, that's nice. The Pentagon still exists, Medicaid still exists, Social Security still exists, all of the genuine capital B power of the bureaucracy is effectively untouched. The Department of Education, look, we can argue all day long. I'm sorry, it's a joke. It's just not even powerful, absolutely at all, especially considering the vast majority of school funding does not even come from the federal government, and the policies at the state level are the people who actually are the
Trust
people
me,
who put
that funding from the federal government matters.
Yes, I'm not saying it doesn't
especially in poor districts,
matter.
it matters
and
a lot.
That money's not going anywhere, or at least according to them for right now. But the policies at an individual school district level are in the school district and the state. Those are the people who mostly rule what actually happens inside of that building. So my point is that if you keep doing this slapshot approach and you have the vibe of cutting the government, but by doing that, you're actually making government institutions and all that more popular, you could, in effect, see a rise of a much more powerful and dangerous deep state in the future. What's the Tim Walz quote?
I can't find it, but basically, he got asked about, this question of how do Democrats think about rebuilding the federal government, and, his response is we need to think about, he said it could almost have a silver lining, because it could allow them to build back better. That's not what he said, but that's the idea. It's like basically, we can, no one says the federal government is like perfect and not sclerotic and doesn't have these issues. It does. So, you've like devastated this. We get to rebuild potentially from the ashes and make it better, stronger, et cetera. So there is some of that thinking going on in the Democratic Party. But, I was looking at the numbers of just in terms of the immediate term impact of the corporate enforcement actions that were previously occurring under the Biden administration, a quarter of them have been dropped. So like, it's just open season for, all these corporations, whether they were, under investigation from the CFPB or the SEC or the National Labor Relations Board, et cetera. It's huge numbers of those enforcement actions have been dropped. In terms of talent, you have had, I'm not sure the numbers at this point, but you've had significant numbers of federal employees who have either taken the fork in the road or they've been fired, pushed down, et cetera. And some of those people, a lot of those people are the types that they had another opportunity in the private sector. They were the more valuable federal government employees. Getting that talent back is very difficult because it's a hard sell. You're going to make less money working for the federal government. Public servants have just been like completely vilified, and the idea of even being a quote unquote public servant is sort of like under attack. So that expertise isn't something that's easy to return. So in any case, in my estimation, they're doing a lot of significant damage that's going to cause a lot of long-term problems. And Democrats may have aspirations to be able, like Tim Walz said, to be able to build it back more effective, stronger, better expertise, et cetera. But, that's a big ask. So we'll see.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.